I think there's a good question to ask about Mr. Putin's motives, what he's doing at the moment, because last night there was a report that he's bolted for his residence at Valdai because something is cracking inside Moscow, or maybe this is a carefully curated fog machine from the Kremlin's press shop to suggest that Putin is actually functioning, or maybe he just needs to get back to the fridge, the Smeg fridge, of course, the home of Putin. Let's not proceed with anything but prudence. As of this morning, the flurry of telegram posts and secondary outlets claim that Putin's 1196 command aircraft lifted from Moscow and dropped off public trackers near Tver, the region that hosts one of his most secure residences. Of course, we know that for the most part Putin travels by train. There is solid precedent for an identical pattern on the 24th of June 2023 during the Wagner mutiny, though, when flight tracked evidence showed the president's 1196 plane depart and then vanish near Tver, while Dmitry Peskov insisted Putin was working in the Kremlin. That episode is documented by Ukrinform and Ukrainstar Pravda, with parallel denials also reported by UK media. Today's iteration remains unverified by primary Russian state sources beyond the familiar Peskov formula, which historically tells us nothing except that the system is on message, treated as a live possibility, not a fact. But it suggests that Putin is so anxious he's not even going to bother with the train. He's going to get on an aeroplane. If he is still alive, whoever it is who got on that plane did so with anxiety. Now, to the strategic frame. Over the past 5 days, Ukraine has absorbed one of Russia's largest mixed strikes of 2025. Between the night of the 19th to the 20th of September and the morning of the 20th, Russia launched hundreds of Shahid drones and dozens of missiles across multiple regions. The Associated Press confirms at least 3 dead and dozens wounded, with impacts in Kyiv, Dnipro, Odessa and more. Ukrainian air defences claimed very high inception rates, with Western reporting noting extensive shootdowns and follow-on Ukrainian retaliatory strikes against Russian energy nodes. The outcome was not a Russian breakthrough, but attrition and terror with limited military effect. Ukraine's reply has been precise and economic. 3 threads matter. First, the oil war. Ukrainian long-range drones have hit refineries and petrochemical plants deep inside Russia since summer. This morning, Reuters confirmed another strike against Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat in Bashkortostan, the second in less than a week. The Kyiv Independent carried the same site and timing. The campaign has progressively choked Russian refining and diesel exports. The Financial Times reports refinery outages removing over 1 million barrels per day of capacity at points, pushing diesel premiums to multi-year highs and starving Russia's logistics of margin. This isn't symbolism, it's sustained pressure on cash flow, mobility and war stock rotation. Second, the air denial puzzle. Ukraine's F-16s have moved from promise to practice. In the 19th to the 20th of September attack window, multiple outlets reported fighting Falcons, hunting Russian cruise missiles, a target set designed to slip underground radar. The broad picture is consistent with earlier assessments that F-16s extend Ukraine's interceptor envelope and complicate Russian salvo design. The exact numbers will be debated, but the effect is plain in the AP casualty and damage pattern. Russia's massed knights of metal are buying diminished returns against cities that now layer Patriots, Iris-T, NASAMS, Jepads, electronic warfare, and manned fighters. Third, the underworld. Moscow has leaned on a macabre improvisation near Kupiansk and elsewhere, pushing assault units through decommissioned gas pipelines, risking suffocation. To cross the Oskil, and appear behind Ukrainian lines. Medusa, RFE, RL and others have mapped these movements, while Ukrainian sources describe countermeasures from flooding to wire obstacles and fire control on exits. It's a tactic of avoidance that admits air and drone dominance above ground and surrenders initiative terrain and plumbing below ground. Effective on a bad day, suicidal when detected. Why does any of this relate to a sudden presidential flight to Valdai when the outer war grinds and the inner system purges? Leaders retreat to hardened nodes. Since spring 2024, the defence establishment has been in a rolling decapitation by courtroom. In July and August this year alone, Russian courts handed down sentences to a former deputy defence minister and several generals on corruption or fraud charges. In other words, Putin is purging his own army. Timur Ivanov received 13 years. Major General Ivan Popov got 5 years. A former deputy chief of the General Staff got 17. These are not anonymous colonels. They are senior pillars of a 20-year patronage machine, removed in public while the army bleeds in the east. A purge can terrify and tidy for a season. It cannot conjure competence. Consider the compound effect of this. Military failure has a material ledger. If you cannot reliably move fuel, you cannot mass. If you cannot mass, you cannot bombard. If you bombard and still cannot reach, you terrorize. That is where Russia sits this week, as the Salavat smoke plume answers the KH-101 flight plan. Organizational failure has a human ledger. Purges replace craft with fear. Fear throttles initiative. Initiative dies at the very moment a rigid army needs it most. The trials reported by Reuters, AP, RFE and others advertise discipline. They also scream fragility and anxiety and a purge. Political failure has a spatial ledger. When the centre is uncertain, the centre disperses. The precedent for moving the principal to Valdai during acute stress exists and is documented for June 2023. That doesn't prove tonight's rumour, or last night's rumour, but it explains why it lands with credibility. Putin is in flight. So how should we characterise the moment? Putin is in flight, but at the moment, we don't know what he's in flight from. But he's definitely moving quickly because otherwise he would use the train. It's not a coup yet. It's not yet a crack-up. Rather a familiar Russian equilibrium that is running out of slack. The Kremlin's preferred triad is money to lubricate elites, menace to police the margins, myth to bind the middle, propaganda throughout. The money is tighter after refinery attrition and sanctions on refined products. The menace is busy on every front from Kursk to Kupiansk. The myth is harder to sell when generals stand in the dock and the presidential aircraft plays peekaboo with public trackers. If Putin has relocated to Valdai today, the operational meeting could be banal or ominous at the same time. But why did he not take the train, his preferred mode of transport? Banal because leaders decamp to secure sites during threat spikes. Ominous because a leader confident in his capital usually prefers to be seen in his capital, especially on a day when missiles are falling and power stations are burning and there's some sort of adventure going on in Belarus. The Valdai narrative is thus a weather vane for confidence. And if Putin is confident, he would have gone to Valdai by train. If Putin is not confident, he goes quickly. The more we hear of it without crisp refutation and verifiable imagery from the Kremlin, the worse his own people read the barometer. And it doesn't matter if he appears on television, because he has an identical office in the Kremlin and in Valdai and in other places. Where does this go to next? You need to watch 3 things over the coming week. The first is the refinery process and the diesel export print versus the FT baseline. If the Salavat strike is followed by another Samara outage, Russia's internal price spikes will deepen and the road lift for the army will tighten further. Secondly, the night-by-night intercept ratios after the 19th to the 20th of September, if F-16s continue to block the salvos from Russia and the ground defences soak up the Shaheeds, Russia's cost per effect will keep climbing. The Kremlin can spend its way to exhaustion. It cannot spend its way to victory if the pipelines and the depots keep burning. And three, the purge tape. More senior arrests or sentences in October would signal that the regime thinks fear is still the best lubricant. History suggests that is an expensive oil. The Ivanov, the Popov and related cases already show how much institutional muscle has been cut to feed the theatre of control. So, proportion. Rumours of urgent flights are the bright objects. They tempt us to chase shadows. The darker reality is slower and more decisive. Ukraine's campaign is methodically degrading Russia's ability to move fuel, to protect the sky, to rotate forces. Russia's campaign is methodically downgrading its own senior ranks to courtrooms while throwing men into pipes to avoid drones. One path compounds competence, the other compounds entropy. So I would say it's a little bit like the story of Putin as a boy confronting the rat on the staircase. In this case, the rat is the Kremlin. And the rat still has teeth. The rat is still dangerous. In fact, when cornered, the rat is more dangerous, perhaps, than it was in the first place. The rat is now cornered. On the 24th of September 2025, the Kremlin again faces a problem it cannot bomb away. Unverified reports say that Putin has shifted to Valdai. Verified reports say Ukraine hit Salavat while F-16s blunted a mass strike. The battlefield is teaching the same lesson as the courtroom. Purges cannot fix logistics. Missiles cannot fix morale. Flights to safe houses cannot fix a failing theory of victory. Russia is losing.